Everybody. I'm David Jerome with the Chamber of Commerce, and today we continue our discussion that we've been having on reopening the economy here of Texas and El Paso especially. And today we have a very special guest. We have Rick Francis with us from the WestStar Bank. Now, Rick is, let me make an introduction if I could, Rick. We have Rick's experience is just, I'm looking at your bio and I don't even know where to start, but let me say this, Rick. You are obviously the chairman and CEO of WestStar, maybe the most accomplished member of terms of different things in the community that I could see here. Obviously with our Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which I want to highlight. Also, a couple of other points that I thought were interesting to highlight: distinguished alum of the J.S. Rollins College of Business, and I can't think of anybody who would earn that more. And then also 2007 with your lovely wife, you were named El Paso Philanthropist of the Year, which I really think is important because I think sometimes we forget, business and community do go so well together, but you don't. And I think that's important to highlight. Graduate of Texas Tech University, and I know a proud graduate, but also a member of the strike force that the governor has put together and the chair of the El Paso strike force for the mayor, which I sit on with you. And so obviously credentialed in a way that makes you uniquely qualified for today's conversation, and I really do appreciate it. But not just that, obviously the resume is extraordinary, but I want to also just note on a personal note, that I consider you one of our finest mentors, and I personally consider you a mentor in the community, which you've been wonderful to do for me. So a great guy, but also whenever I talk about business with you, you think about it at the right scale, which is, I think, an achievement in its own right. I always find that you even get me thinking about it the right way, how to think bigger and better about our opportunities. And, I guess maybe I'd summarize it when I have conversations with Rick about El Paso and business. I often think why versus why not, which is, I think, wonderful for today. Just the right leadership ingredients for us to be discussing how to restart our economy in the middle of a century sort of level impact thing with this pandemic. So Rick, maybe if you don't mind, I could ask you a question to start.
Well, first, thank you, David, for having me. And it's certainly, it's good to have the Chamber playing a leadership role as we begin to reopen our economy, and your leadership is appreciated very much.
As is yours. And I'm really, obviously, as you can see, pleased to have you here today. Rick, when you look at this seismic event in our economy and our history, what is your sort of initial thoughts? I mean, you run I think the most successful bank in Texas. What do you, from your perspective, what are you seeing just on broad, big strokes?
Well, I don't think, number one, none of us knew what a Zoom call was until March. And suddenly I'm on, 2 to 6 a day right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of things have changed. In the early stages, as we saw this thing begin to envelop our country, really impact New York City in February, we saw fear really driving a lot of the decision making because it was so unknown. This was a disease that could kill. It spread rapidly. And so many decisions got made in the early time based on lack of data, lack of tests. And so with each passing week, we learn more and more about the disease. We learn more and more about our capabilities. And we are at a point now and have been in the last 6 weeks where data is driving some of the decision making, not fear. And that's a good thing. And so we're able to chart a clearer course, because certainly some would argue that in that initial first few weeks of March and into April, the cure was worse than the disease for most of America. And we as business leaders, as our community leaders, our governor, our president, we have to find a balance. The mayor and county judge, we have to find the proper balance that protects those that we've identified as the most vulnerable, and really create a situation where we do not overwhelm our medical system, and as we saw in New York and New Orleans, so that we're able to reopen our economy safely and monitor the ICU beds in our community to make sure we're not overflowing and creating dangerous situations. I believe that the governor has done an excellent job in terms of slowly, safely opening our own community. He used caution and delayed things a week, sent in his National Guard strike force, that every nursing home was thoroughly tested and cleaned, and he's moving towards the jails and towards those high-risk areas that have been identified, so that we can try and in some weeks we saw spikes in our community, and those in many cases were related to either a holiday where we kind of threw social distancing to the wind, or they were a result of when the governor's team went in and tested high-risk areas, those cases were already there. We just didn't know about it. And so our results spiked up strictly because of increased testing. We also today we're north of 4% of our population are getting tested. We're moving towards 5, towards 6. And so we are solving that issue. And today, if you want a test, you can call 211 and you can get a test. And so that makes a big difference. And we're moving towards the ability to, the day could come where we will be able to rapidly, in sporting events and in restaurants, I mean, if someone wants to come in, they can be tested on the spot and try and bridge that gap before we have a working vaccine that will give us the safety we need to just get back to the way things were, if we ever get back to the way things were.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are sort of thinking about, is what the next normal looks like. And I think you're spot on, Rick. At least from whatever we hear at the chamber, people are thinking about now, the real test is how to peacefully sort of coexist with this thing until there's a vaccine. And I think the efforts that you highlight, that you've been helping steer with the governor, obviously, I think have been nothing short of exact spot on for what we need. You can't stay closed forever. That's not sustainable. And you can't act like this doesn't exist. It's going to be this balancing act. You sort of, and I think having a phased reopening the way that it's been charted by the governor and the strike force, I think has been exactly what's been called for. So I think we just ran a survey last weekend and everybody agreed with it. And certainly the members agree with you. So that's excellent. And we are on a tactical level, asking even at the chamber for people when they show up to wear a mask, continue to practice hygiene, like washing your hands and social distancing, and even to the extent reasonable, make sure that if you're not feeling well, don't come in. It's sort of, we're still in that phase. We have to exist with this.
And as we reopen, the goal, I think, of business is to make your clients feel safe. And so if they feel safe, they'll come to your restaurant or your place of business. If they don't feel safe in there, they will vote with their feet. And so during this period of time, and that's not the flip side of that also is, as management, we have to send the proper message to our employees. Okay. Our team members need to be, they've got people coming in and they're scared. So it's really a two-edged sword of making your employees feel safe and making your clients feel safe. And then theoretically you will thrive in this environment. There are certainly, we talked about, there are businesses that their business models have been disrupted. Their business model, like a party hall, Their business model is to bring large groups of people together for some special event. Those business models right now are extremely disrupted. Movie theaters, extremely disrupted. And so they have to kind of circle the wagons to find out, will it come back? In what form will it come back? And can I survive until it comes back? And at the bank, we advise people, cash is king and credit is queen. And so you, as a business, need to not only examine your expense structure, but certainly look at your liquidity levels so that if your revenue is challenged for some period of weeks or months, you're able to survive. Obviously, we've encouraged, and at WestStar, it was one of our finest hours as we were able to process, north of $260 million in PPP loans for people. Excuse me. So I think businesses today, as we're getting open, many businesses are beginning to return to the new normal. And that new normal will be some sort of restriction until a vaccine is around, some sort of change of your standard operating procedures. It's interesting. There are many businesses that have announced they're not going to bring back their employees for months. Those businesses, that may lend their business model may lend itself to that. But I've talked to many businesses that having people work from home is not working. There are productivity challenges. They were not prepared. They are a paper-based. They are not as digitally adept. They do not have robust systems in place that allow the free flow of information to people off-site. And they're very challenged. When people are sent home, their productivity drops significantly, which puts a burden on those that are in the office. And so we're seeing many companies trying to figure out how to get their employees back as fast as possible so that they can get back to some normalcy.
Yeah, that's true. If you weren't digitally savvy before, you better be now. And if you can't be, yes, getting back to the office makes a big difference. And not everybody, even if you have the capability with digital, not everybody's business model lends itself to that at the customer facing side, right? So it's although I think banks have done pretty well with that, I have to say.
I've talked to a number of businesses who've said we were considering these new software programs. This just highlighted to us we needed to make the decision now, not later, only to call their vendor to find out that now it's an 11-month lead time. And all of a sudden they're like, oh man, because everybody in America is trying to go in this direction right now.
Yeah, well, it is. And it's really interesting. I think that one of the real challenges you highlighted is how do I deal with the fact that we're transitioning from a short-term idea, which is I'm working out of home, to now a distributed workforce, maybe on a much more permanent basis. That has productivity limitations around it for some folks. Really
right.
does.
And the implications to the office rental market, to retail. I mean, so this thing flows throughout our delivery supply chain and to the foundation of downtown office space and things of that nature.
Well, Rick, I'm going to ask you two more questions because I know I'm taking up a chunk of your day here. But one that I wanted to ask, because I'm always intrigued with these kinds of conversations when I'm lucky enough to get them over a Chardonnay with you, is what is, in your experience, the most important business advice you'd give to somebody? What is the one thing, if you could, that you tell somebody right now? I heard you mention liquidity. Is that it? What is it that you would advise somebody to do?
Well, certainly there's not one silver bullet. Certainly, as I said, liquidity is incredibly important, not only for survival, but as we saw in the Great Recession in 9, 10, and 11, those businesses that maintain liquidity, they had some great business opportunities that came through when businesses that didn't have liquidity were forced to sell assets at a probably the worst time.
Yeah.
So it's both for survival and for opportunity coming out. Businesses need to be really getting liquidity in place. That's easier said than done. The other one is certainly communication and flexibility. Many businesses are going to have to look at their business model that they may have to tweak so that they will be successful in kind of the new world order. And I there will be some things that are permanently changed. We after 9/11, you never get to go to the gate anymore. You get stopped. In most airports across America, it never went back.
Nope.
And so there's going to be some things that come out of this that permanently change. We're already seeing, the whole open office concept where, and as somebody that's moving in a new office tower, we were being encouraged to downsize the cubicles and, get everybody closer together, closer and closer. That's all out the window now. I mean, Suddenly you're like, no. That will never come back, okay? So the whole social distancing, cubes are going to be at a certain standard size, and that's what everybody's going to feel comfortable because we could have a new wave or another, be it SARS or COVID-19. There's always going to be something. So that would, again, right now, certainly for businesses, flexibility, liquidity, and perseverance.
Well, that is the mixture. I will say there is no easy solution. And I do think one thing that we're certainly trying to emphasize as we hear it, especially for small businesses, test and learn. You don't have to go all in. Be careful with it right now, especially. But I do think the disruptions that we see in the market do create opportunities. And I'm encouraging people to be careful about it, but definitely go after them. There's some new things out there that you could try.
Absolutely. And you have some good financial institutions in this community who are prepared to help businesses, not only survive, but grab those opportunities.
Well, that's what credit's for, to help you grow, right? It's the queen, as you say. But maybe the last question I could ask, Rick, is because of your unique position in the community, being on the governor's strike force and also the chair of the mayor's opening panel, what is it that you see happening there? How are you seeing the community coming together? How are you feeling about this panel and what's happening at the state and local level there?
So on the state level, again, I was very honored to be chosen by both the governor and by our mayor and county judge. But on the state level, you've got significantly more resources. There are some amazing people sitting on the governor's strike force, but fundamentally the issues are kind of similar. Lots of businesses clamoring to be allowed to open up, be allowed to be responsible and institute policies that would allow them. As an example, in the hospital situation, we essentially closed our hospitals because we were worried about the wave of COVID-19 victims that would come in, like what happened in New York. And as someone that's a 28-year board member of Providence, we had to, as the other hospitals, we were laying people off because we never saw the wave. And so we had this, you could drive by one of the Providence hospitals and the parking lots were empty, okay? People that needed elective surgeries, and sometimes when you need to get a cancer PET scan, you may not think that's elective, okay? That's life-threatening when you can't get proper diagnosis for when you're in the middle of cancer treatment. So it was something that we were sensitive on a state level. We got to get these hospitals open for business. They're losing hundreds of millions of dollars while they wait around in case there's a wave. And as it became apparent, we weren't going to be overwhelmed, then things like that. A lot of hospitality, restaurants, they were, lighting me up on a local level every day. When am I going to get open? When am I going to get open? And I feel for them. I understand giving them a PPP loan that is forgiven when you hire people back makes no sense if you're closed. You can't hire them back. And so in their wisdom, Congress has opened that window so that right now we feel pretty confident that unless you just close the business and file bankruptcy, if you open, now that there's a 24-week window, pretty much everyone's going to get that loan forgiven. And hopefully that's a bridge that will allow them to continue to operate until business gets back to, again, whatever the new normal is. And the safer we make people feel to come into our businesses, the quicker they'll return.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have noticed, although I'd be interested in your opinion on this, this kind of demand shock, let's say, where people are a little bit nervous about coming back. It isn't that you open your business and all of a sudden customers come rolling in.
Exactly.
They're being careful as well. And like you mentioned earlier, it behooves us all to take care of our employees and our customers in this thing to make sure that they feel comfortable coming back to deal with some of that demand shock, let's say, that I think if you're not careful, will hit you square between the eyes in terms of you trying to reopen. But I appreciate the insight on the strike force. I think it's very important that we have individuals such as yourself in those positions to make sure that we are negotiating this next normal as carefully as we can. Rick, I just wanted, go ahead.
So a couple of things. El Paso, in this strike force, El Paso was unique in that one of our greatest strengths, our connection as what we call the Borderplex region with Mexico and New Mexico became one of the real, I wouldn't call it a crisis point, but it certainly became a uncertainty of, in most everywhere else, there were some other Texas border cities, but nothing like New Mexico, which was on a very different path than Texas was, and Mexico, which was very challenged on a national level and all the way down to the municipal level. And so when we would give input, a lot of input was coming in, and on a statewide level, there was over 30 counties in Texas that didn't have a single case. These people are screaming why did you lock us down? Here locally, I think our businesses were very responsible. They recognize our strengths and weaknesses, but they too wanted to give us an opportunity to get open, get some cash flow going, and we're going to do the right thing. We're going to make people feel safe. And so it was, El Paso is, I think, doing well. And again, we monitor I get a report every morning, ICU beds. Initially we were monitoring ventilators, but that has never really come to play. But certainly we're monitoring ICU beds to make sure that we have capacity there. Every hospital has a surge plan, and that normally gets implemented every year during the flu season.
Right.
So it's not something they designed just for this. They've been prepared for something like this, maybe not as aggressive as this has been, but certainly they have been prepared, and that came through with how well our medical providers have performed during this period of time.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I do think that business has to be prepared for, the potentialities for slowing down the opening if that does happen. And I think looking at ICU beds and ventilators is not a bad place to check that, are we doing it at the right pace? The other thing that you noted that I think maybe we can consider at least wrapping up around perhaps is the idea that if you're not feeling well, clearly don't go out and get involved, but do go to the hospital. If you have an underlying condition or, I think it's sort of dreadful to consider the idea of heart disease and strokes and cancer at this time not being attended to because people aren't going to the hospital. They need to. And so you mentioned that earlier, and I want to underline that point because I know that's a big issue. Rick, before I wrap up with any comments, is there anything that you'd like to say to the viewers before?
Well, as I said earlier, I think El Paso has done an excellent job, really, of taking the assets that we had in terms of our medical assets and our the mayor and the county judge have all kinds of different data coming. In the beginning, we get data from various data points, and you look at it and you say, "Whoa, this doesn't make sense." Ultimately, we began to be able to rationalize the data and come up with a proper plan. Everyone from first providers to our medical community to our businesses have been very, very responsible. And I think I can't speak to what will happen in the fall when we reopen the schools. We could have another wave, but I think we're prepared for it. And we, by getting our businesses open, our economy will stabilize, and we will not have another repeat of 9, 10, and 11.
Well, on that note, Rick, I really do appreciate it. I will say to underline a point you made earlier, we are very fortunate in El Paso to have the leadership we do, both in our elected officials, but also in our business community. And I have to say, from the chamber's perspective, which also is a unique sort of view with 1,400 members and things, you get to look across a horizon, as it were, of business responses. And I think most people have done a pretty good job. I mean, really have tried. But we're a lucky community in that way, and I really do appreciate not only your representation of us at so many different forums, important ones at this point, but also your guidance and friendship throughout all of this has been terrific and very, very much needed for all of us. So thank you, Rick, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
David, thank you for inviting me, and same to you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye now.